right, I think we're ready to go.
Need an agenda?
No, I thought that was a pen.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. I am sharing my screen so everyone can see the agenda for today. I'll start with a roll call vote. Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
And here.
And I am Councilor Cook here. And we have as our staff liaison the Deputy City Manager, Suzanne Woodland. The first item on our agenda is to review and approve the minutes from the February 5th, 2024 meeting. I will share those for you here for everyone to see. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Cook, were you able to send out that list of dates that we discussed?
Yes, it should have come around to you from the legal office, from Barbara and legal.
Like a hard copy?
Yes.
Possible, that'd be great.
Okay, great.
I got it somewhere. I saw it in the same file.
We should, everyone should have them, so hopefully, and if you don't, we will make sure they're sent again. Barbara sent them around.
All the dates?
All the dates?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay, good, good. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved?
Second?
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. The only item on our agenda today is the charter amendment referral from the City Council. As you will all remember, the motion at Council was to move to request that the Governance Committee review potential charter amendments to address legal interpretation in the case of perceived or actual conflicts between charter and state law. Everyone should have received a memo from the legal department around charter amendments shared by Attorney Bob Sullivan. This would be the memo explaining kind of the process and what happens when there is a conflict between the charter or a perceived conflict between the charter or ordinances and state law. And what you would do then to remedy that. And one of the recommendations that Attorney Sullivan had made was that if we were going to go down this path, that we go through and identify all the conflicts between the charter and, or perceived conflicts between the charter and ordinances and state law. Now that is quite a cumbersome task. And I'm not going to say that we shouldn't pursue that task, but he came up with an alternative as well. I spoke to him on Friday, and the alternative was to draft essentially a preliminary paragraph that would accompany the charter but not be part of the charter. So in the same way that when we look at the rules and the orders of the council, there's a cover page that says rules and orders, and then you see the rules and the orders behind it. Now, we don't adopt the cover page. We could do the same thing, according to Attorney Sullivan, to the charter. We could put a cover page on it that says Charter of the City of Portsmouth, and then have a little disclaimer of how we review it. And this is the language for that disclaimer that he shared with us. And so because it's not part of the charter, it doesn't have to be adopted and voted by the residents of Portsmouth. It would just be an explanatory note that would come before the charter, and the council would have to vote on this to approve it. So this is much less taxing as a process, but it might also be reasonable to attach an asterisk and say C note, and you could put at the back of the charter or somewhere else, or you could have a link on the website that lists all the perceived conflicts that have come up so that people understand, and when they have a concern, maybe they can go there and say, oh, this has been addressed before. One of the perceived conflicts that is often raised with us is the structure of our planning board is atypical when it comes to state law, current state law. But it's actually based upon a prior state law, And we are grandfathered in because our board and processes existed before the current state law did. And so we have several things like that in our ordinances, in our charter, that where our process just existed prior, and we're allowed to continue that process. So I think that that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. So that's my introduction.
So I guess I would ask the legal department if they are aware of any items in the charter that don't follow that we should be addressing, or it's not an easy task to review the charter, review the statutes, and review the ordinances, and mesh them together. So I guess what I'm asking is, are there some that have come, some things that the legal department is aware of that we should look at, and if not, then what is our process in doing that?
So as Attorney Sullivan alluded to or spoke to in his memorandum, we are aware that the city charter and state law differ in how vacancies are to be determined, particularly with regard to the police commission. We recently had the legal department rendered an opinion in terms of how to appeal or ask for a recount, and there's a difference between what is described in state law and what is described in our charter. And so those are the two most recent examples that have come up. And there are probably others where, as Attorney Sullivan points out, because of the timing of how, state law changes and, our charter does not change sometimes as frequently as state law, that really it's the legal department kind of making a determination in the first instance, is there an actual conflict? Because sometimes there's not an actual conflict. And we can take the, say, more generous approach, which is kind of what we did with regard to the recount. We took a more generous approach to allow a longer period of time for someone to submit. And so that's the kind of adjustments that the legal department, or interpretations that the legal department makes in each case where there is some difference between what is in state law and what is in our charter. And, certainly the city council could change its charter provisions to be more in accord with state law, but that may not be what you actually want to do, because you may prefer to have, that longer period of time, for example, to file for a recount, or we may prefer the way we fill the vacancies for police commission or some other commission, or maybe not. I seem to recall it was a rather challenging process, just in terms of that whole piece. And so one could certainly tackle that, for example, and look at it item by item, in which case, as Councilor Cook described, if you're going to actually change a charter provision, then it's going to need that more robust process versus simply a note at the beginning of the charter that says, hey, this is a little complex, and it depends on, is there an actual conflict? And then you've got to look at the timing issues. When was one adopted? When was the other adopted? And which one should logically then control? And so it's just a flag that the legal department will make those determinations in those cases. You could do it either way, but that's...
I guess my question was, are there any that you're aware of that don't follow this? Is the legal department aware of any that are in our charter that were inadvertently constructed after, let's say, a statute or an ordinance that was created after a statute and charter? So And those were the ones I think that we would have to look at.
So you're asking, is there anything that we actually do absolutely need to change? Because we know it doesn't work the way it's currently constructed, and we don't have a good explanation currently for that.
We could get back to you. I think a lot depends, do you want to do that? In which case, you'd want to look at the police commission vacancy issue and decide, do you like state law? You know, and
Right.
here's how we dealt with it in interpreting our charter, and choose one. Then you could, if you like the way the state law resolves it, then you could look at what are the steps then to make a charter change. So if you want that kind of detail, then, you know, we could pick off some of these and bring them forward, and you could make a decision on whether you wanted to tackle that or not.
Which makes sense. I'm going to pull up that provision so you can see it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure everyone's wondering, what is that?
Yeah.
What is the,
Actually,
one we're
stack 'em.
talking about?
When there's a
on this
vacancy,
whole issue.
the council makes an appointment, is the current language.
That's not how we handled it last time, though.
I thought.
I was on
There
the
was,
Blue
there
Ribbon
was a
Committee.
lot of
Commission?
back and
No.
forth between state law and.
Yeah.
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 Because we ended up handling it through a Blue Ribbon Committee.
We did something,
And what does the statute say? That
Clever.
Yeah.
that it's the next vote?
No, that it's an appointment, I believe,
Yeah.
is what the statute says. And so I'm trying to pull it up here so that everybody can see it. Let me make sure I have, there it is. Here we go. All right, so let me share this.
Is it back in section 8 about charter departments? Oh, you'll get
Yeah,
it
it's
for us on the
here.
screen.
So you'll see here, in the charter, there is a little subnote. It's handled as a footnote. And the way that they handled this, because then that is not an amendment to the charter, it's a footnote to the charter. By a letter dated August 7, 2015, addressed to the Secretary of State William Gardner from Assistant Attorney General Stephen Labonte, I don't know if it's Bont or Labonte, given as a directive to the city by the Secretary, it is written, when a vacancy occurs on an elected police commission, the vacancy is filled by appointment of the municipality's governing body until the next regular municipal election. And it cites RSA 105-C:3I. So we just put a note, a legal note, as part, and it's not part of the charter, it's a footnote. So again, did not have to go before the public, but it's an explanatory note, legal note. So that handles that concern
And
for
what
now.
what does the statute say? It's different than that?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know it's not that. That's my recollection. Right. So, but I could bring that back for the next meeting.
Yeah, so
Well, I
this
just-
is,
I want to know if that's something we want to have rather than, I don't know. I just don't know what it is.
My laptop.
so what our charter says is that it's the next runner-up.
Right.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then after that, when the runners-up are depleted, as you'll see here in this provision, then the mayor shall appoint any necessary commissioners. And essentially what this does is it says, no, we have an issue, the state interprets this differently, and this person should be appointed until the next election. So, so I think it's helpful to note this, because also note that this is the way the council is also,
Yes.
if a council member
Somebody
resigns or leaves
resigns
for
or
any reason.
dies, yeah.
Yes, exactly. This is what the charter says for the council as well,
Right.
is that it's the
The
next
next
vote.
best vote getter.
Yeah. So we have this note, this is where we don't necessarily share the same opinion as the state, but we may get a different interpretation if we asked again now. So, and I think that that's an important consideration, is that the charter language was around a long time before
Right.
this state provision was probably adopted.
Right, that's Bob's point, is
Right.
we
Yeah.
have precedent in some of these.
Yeah, yeah. So if we ever hit a point where we needed to discuss this again with the Secretary of State, we could do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, the state law might change.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the.
That is the challenge. And this was not something that we chose to litigate with the
Right.
state either
Correct.
for legal interpretation. So
Yep.
it's not really clear that this guidance is the correct guidance either.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that's the concern then. So if we do something and someone says, wait a minute, and sues, what happens there?
Then the courts will ultimately decide what the
Yep.
right legal guidance is. And so that's the challenge there, because this isn't clear. So it
Yeah.
would be really hard for us to change the charter to knowing that we were changing it so that it was really clear. Because we could change it to this other interpretation and then still have a problem later. So I think that that's also important to note.
It's the same for the Fire Commission too, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
once again, I mean.
Which way do we go?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we could,
Or-
we could spend a long time debating all of these things and which way, and I'm sure our legal department could come up with recommendations on which way we wanted to go. But the question, I think, the bigger question, is it worth
Right.
going to the voters to amend the charter? Or would it be easier just to, and make more sense just to add a note explaining that there are challenges with legal interpretation and this is how we usually do it? And then, so that the public isn't constantly questioning where the conflicts are and we have something to refer to and say, there is a preliminary paragraph that explains this. So I guess that's my question of you guys is, like, what do you prefer as a path? I'll go down either of them, whatever the committee thinks is the right path to take.
I would think that the path of explanation seems the easiest path and the clearest for residents. I think even putting the charter amendment on there, you can. We still need some type of explanatory note to explain it to the public. I also think when it comes to, and please correct me if I'm wrong with your longevity versus mine, I feel as if when it comes to some of like the police commission and the fire commission and I guess the city council, so the three elected bodies, we aren't seeing a lot of openings or obviously, like I said, I was on in 2019 the mayor's blue ribbon committee when we did have the opening. And as someone, well, I don't know what it was like on staff end, but as a resident who was unelected at the time, I felt like it was a good process that we came up with. And so I think just explaining that, there are different avenues of the process and keeping it how it is, to me, makes more sense. Because essentially, while it says a mayor's appointee, the mayor appointed the blue ribbon committee.
Makes sense?
And I think if you want to open up the charter for amendments, you want to get as many as you need, and that's
Well, that was
that's
my
a
next
big
question.
program of work. For something that seems to be functioning for us relatively well.
And it seems to me that we had some conversations over the past 2 years about some of our ordinances that might require a charter amendment, and I don't remember what they were, but it seems like we've had that conversation in this room sometimes. And,
Yeah, I think it's around conflict of interest,
yeah.
because the charter has conflict language. That's,
Right. And I think we're
More-
still, we're still in compliance with that.
Yeah.
Correct?
Okay.
Yeah, the other piece we've been kind of mindful of is to the extent that there are requirements for notice for public hearings, that is becoming more and more problematical to the extent they're required to be in a newspaper. And some of that is driven by state law. And
Cut off.
then I haven't double check the charter, but that's on our that's on our sort of radar to look at, simply because the lead times now are so long that it is very hard to do business in the way that we would like to get it done efficiently to deal with that. And I think that is probably one area that we are looking at to figure out, do we need to make any adjustments in our ordinances or elsewhere we're allowed to make it easier, knowing we have other avenues of communication that we use and that people are picking up, information.
And which are allowed in the charter. I mean, it says publication means in the daily newspaper published in Portsmouth, but there's also language about or another method.
Yep, and that's where we're trying to see if we're comfortable enough kind of moving to that other method without making any changes.
Change is never easy at the city because everyone has expectations that things will always be done the way that they've always been done. So it is hard transitioning. We should keep monitoring and making sure that our legal documents allow for that transition to take place.
Exactly, and that's really what we're trying to focus on because the landscape is changing, and as we look at more technology tools and different ways to procure and all that kind of stuff, to make sure that we remove any of those barriers that keep us from getting what we need.
But some of it is state statute.
Some of it is state statute.
I think
Yeah.
requests for proposals, I think, have to be.
No, they do not.
That's changed.
It's not governed by state law.
Yeah.
So. But we may have to update our ordinance, yes.
It makes it easier for us to update the ordinance.
Yes. It certainly does. It gives us more flexibility, and we're in the process right now of looking at some opportunities, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So is everyone more comfortable with considering, because this is what I'm hearing, considering an explanatory note
Yeah.
at the front of the charter and making that recommendation back to council? Okay. I want everyone has this language in front of them. It's possible that we could make this recommendation, if you're comfortable with the language, back to council for the next council meeting. It's pretty basic language drafted by the legal department, so.
Well, Bob hasn't given up any rights of ours. He's saying anything that we had before the state statute, his language about timing
Yeah.
is important. He's protecting our precedents.
Yep.
My worry about a paragraph would be, well, wherever the charter and the state statute disagree, the state statute trumps. But Bob's more nuanced than that. He's protecting us.
Yeah, because state statutes can happen, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really important, and the state statutes do shift back and forth.
Right.
So I know there are a lot of municipal bills in front of the State House right now.
More than 1,000.
Yeah, that can change the way we do things, but they don't necessarily change our charter or our ordinances or our practices because ours have been in place. So, so is there anything that any questions, concerns about this language?
I think it's a good
Okay.
language.
Okay. If I could get a motion to approve this, to move this back to the council, approve this strategy and the language that was forwarded to us, I will then put it on the council agenda from the governance committee.
I'll move that.
Okay.
I can second that.
Any further discussion?
I just read it one more time, just to make sure.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Okay. This will go then back to the council as a recommendation from governance. That is all that's on our agenda for this morning. I know that there was someone on from the public. I want to make sure that if anybody wants to speak, that we have someone. There's no one in the room. So is there anyone who would like to speak from the public? Please. I don't know if I have a hand up or not. Feel free to raise your hand. No?
Should we just be watching?
Susan,
Maybe just watching. Oh. Okay, then.
Susan?
If no one, if we don't have any public comment, the only announcement that I had is I thought I should make sure I mention this here because Councilor Lombardi was not in the legislative subcommittee meeting this week, so or on Friday. We did have a question at legislative subcommittee about how the council was going to address challenges around individuals who, I think there were concerns about the hearing process and if that was the right process. And I did respond to that question by saying that I was going to request at the next council meeting that the governance committee look at training for volunteers as its next item for its agenda. I don't know what that looks like. We will have to determine that here. But developing some form of robust training for volunteers that everyone goes through when they're volunteering for a committee, and making sure that everybody acknowledges that they've been through that training in some way or another. And so that's going to be my request at the next council meeting. So I thought everyone here should be aware of that, since I did announce that at the legislative subcommittee, and I know Councilor Lombardi was not there.
Was
But
I supposed to be there?
no, you were not. But the other three of us are on the legislative subcommittee. So I think that whenever you have a quorum of one committee sitting at another committee, it's important for everybody to know that that was discussed.
Well, that's interesting because that's exactly a thought that I had, and I'm meeting with the city manager tomorrow on another issue, but I was going to perhaps bring that up, and that even for this specific case, that perhaps we have a consultant who could provide some guidance.
I think whenever there's guidance for volunteers, it's helpful. And I think that some of our volunteers, and that's what I will discuss at council and ask to have that discussed here, some of our volunteers just don't have the background that they feel like they need. So we just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in their roles. And so that's, and I don't know what that will look like. And I don't know if that's something the committee will want to address, but I'm going to put that on the next council agenda. And it looks like our public commenter did raise their hand. So I'm going to go ahead, if that's okay with everyone, let her speak. Yep. Okay. Sue, whenever you are ready.
Hi. Yes, I mean, that was me that brought up that. Since then, I've been looking at our charter. That's why I listened today, so that I could get a sense of, how everything works. It's my learning class. Article 3, Section 3, 14, and 15, and maybe even 1, it's all about officers and the city council, officers and employees. I don't have it right in front of me. A lot of those paragraphs refer to that the city council has the right to reprimand and do censure and all of that of any of their city appointees. But my question, not question right now, but the point that as I read on, like in 3.15, the open hearing was part of the appeals process. of anybody. The whole article is not very clear as far as having worked in the corporate world and worked on handbooks and things like that. It's not clear. There's a lot of interchange of language and stuff. But my point is that I feel like there should be between saying that this is the right that the city council has to have going right to the appeals, like there's a step left out. There should be a step in between saying how the city handles, how do you remove or censure or what have you, and I didn't see that any place in the charter. It may be someplace further down, but I didn't see it. So I thought that was kind of murky and would help alleviate something like what happened before happen again. And that's all I wanted to, and I didn't know how the process goes and if someone can, like at the next meeting, come in and do a presentation or what have you, or if it has to go by legal or whatever. I guess Suzanne would answer that, but.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming today and sharing your thoughts. I do appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you.
And this is something that we handled in a lot of detail last year on working on conflict of interest and ethics. So this may be just the final step is maybe doing that training on these processes because they have changed. And we do have some places where we actually are not yet where we need to be. For example, I believe we put 2 city councilors on the ethics committee when we first changed that. And we're only still drawing 1 by lot. So we have some little things that we might need to do to make sure that we're,
I'd forgotten that.
we need to get to where we want to be, and that everybody's informed of, all of our volunteers are informed of what our processes are, and the path that we should take. I think that that's important.
Yeah. And just to kind of pick up on that thread in terms of process, I think this is, again, where you have a little bit of process and an authority outlined in state law, and then you have this little bit of process, maybe not well spelled out in the charter, and options for taking action, and the two don't mesh very well together. So it's there was certainly it was a challenge because of the different authorities and no clear roadmap on how to take action.
Right.
So
Yeah. One more example of where our charter and ordinance and state law differ. And that is going to be a continued challenge for the city, but it's, I think that we've handled it well today. So I appreciate your assistance with all of that. Are there any other announcements from anyone? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
All
since
in-
there were 2 motions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.